Okay, so we have corrected the scratches, conditioned it a little bit, and now we are going to use some shoe cement. I've cracked the window. Normally I would crack the window and wear a mask. I'm not going to wear a mask because I'm trying to talk to you. But I recommend doing both. And I only have the window cracked because of my cat, but you might want to have the window more open. This stuff gets pretty smelly. It's not super dangerous, it's just stinky. Alright, so as a reminder, what we're looking at is this sort of pulling away. If you look closely, there's like a yellowy cast. That's from the glue that either disintegrated, or I think this was probably stored in either a room that was too hot or too cold, causing it to pull away. This is kind of an optional fix, but I do think it adds to the durability of the shoe, and it makes it look neater along where it attaches to the sole. So as I mentioned in the intro video, you can totally use a brush to do this. It's a little harder to clean rubber cement off a brush. I'm going to be using this glue spreader, but possibly subbing the brush in. This comes with a brush, but it is absolutely enormous, and I find it very hard to use. And then the other thing we need is our hammer, and then if you have a regular hammer and not a nylon tipped hammer like this, just use something to pat it, and I tend to favor a glass cloth. So let's give this a shot. I've never actually done a job this extensive. I've usually done it like along the toe, but we're gonna go for it. Oh, another note, I normally would do the patina before I do this, but since I know not everybody is going to want to do the patina, I figured I would move it up in the sequence. Alright, so we're gonna try to pull this away. If you want to, you can protect the leather with like painter's tape, but I think that gives you a false sense of security. I like to just go for it and use sort of my feeling of where it's going, because you can wipe it off while it's wet. So you can see this stuff is real like slimy, and so you kind of press it on. In some scenarios we are going to use the hammer. Definitely need a rag for this, because I kind of press as I go and then I wipe it off. This stuff it will come out if you wash it. It gets a little gnarly for a little bit there. So I try to finger press it as much as I can. It's already adhering pretty well. But I might pound it down. And the cool thing is I do kind of do it with my hand inside the shoe, which if you're using a regular hammer could be a little dangerous, but you're not really going to hurt yourself that bad. And then I can put this down on the silicone because it's silicone, but if you can't, I would just rest your brush in there. Yeah, it gets a little bit tense in there. It's really hard to apply such a minimal amount, but you can always correct yourself after the fact. And again, just like with the painting, I like to use my fingers because I'm a pretty finger-oriented person, I guess. But yeah, see, as long as it's still wet, which you can see there's some beading up there, you can just wipe it off. And if you really mess up, you can usually peel it off after the fact, because it is that like rubbery consistency. It's a little harder to get off the actual rubber, so I'm gonna be more on top of that. You're kind of like sculpting it on. And again, this is a really extreme case. Usually there's just like one little spot that you can spot correct. That's what happened on my other shoes. But you can see it's already adhering nicely. I'm going to have to go back and check some areas. but you can see it kind of makes these little sinews, and that's what you want because it's a flexible glue. I am actually going to switch to the paintbrush because I want a little more control than the glue spreader is giving me, but I've used that in the past. I really don't need much. And basically, again, I'm doing this because it adds flexibility, some durability, and it just makes the shoe look more kempt. Like, it doesn't look as like misshapen if you sculpt it back into the form of the sole, because the sole doesn't warp like the leather does over time. So it's just like kind of resetting it to like a factory mold. Even here, I'm kind of using a dry brush technique, as dry as you can really get with rubber cement. But basically, like, less is so much more in this scenario, because I can always go back and add more as needed. Here's where, like, see where, like, this is warped? Like, that's where we definitely want to do a little bit of regluing just to make it look nicer. I haven't had to hammer much so far, but I think with this little warped spot, I'm really just, like, sculpting with the weight of the hammer. Even sometimes just like pressing it. Keep feeling, make sure I didn't leave any behind. So yeah, the toe can get a little testy because you can really, it's so visible. But you just kind of do the same thing. Needs a little bit more. So you really, again, you want to see those little like threads, those little sinewy threads, because that means it's gonna adhere. And I'm not gonna go too crazy around everything, but just to make a difference in the shape of the toe. Here's a good spot to hammer. Just to seal that little like air gap. Spot needs more. This stuff does dry on the brush rather quickly, so as soon as I'm done, I'm gonna have to go wash it and like kind of scrape at the brush to make sure I liberate my bristles. I said like with the Turago, you can let it dry, but you really don't want to do that with the rubber cement. There we go. And kind of just like push it down. Alright, let me get back to the part that I've already done. I'm just going to redo some of that. Really turned out the brush was the right tool for the job. I'm just going to check my work a little bit, make sure. So those air pockets look better. Here it's adhering pretty nicely. And see, there's like a little bead of it here, and I'm just gonna gently roll that off and under. Then for any residual, I'm just going to take more of the leather cleaner, get it at that point. I am going to whiten these shoes, so I'm not going to clean it now, but if you weren't going to do that, you can proceed right to the cleaning. If you're really in a scrape, I think hot water is what you want, but again, remember, don't soak the leather. Really try to keep the leather never more than damp. Alright, so it doesn't make like the biggest difference, but it just keeps things looking neater. I just think that looks neater than the original. And like the sinews are gonna dry, so it's gonna look a little nicer. And I will be washing off any remainder that sticks out onto the leather. Alright, so that is how you fix when it's pulling away. And again, that's going to be most important when there's like a little pucker like at the toe. I just did the whole shoe because I'm picky that way. Definitely want to close that. So yeah, you definitely want to keep that closed, keep it airtight. You do not want this to dry on you. And go wash the brush. So when I come back, I will be doing the patina on the shoes. We've gotten to that point.